the 4th. Now, police will be looking closely at speeding, drink driving and using mobile phones, and also whether people are wearing their seatbelts, whether they're small car drivers or those in the heavy vehicles. It's been a terrible lead-in to what's always a dangerous time of year on the roads, and in fact the Transport Workers Union says there's been a spate of fatal truck accidents in the last 10 days. Let's talk about road safety this morning, particularly in relation to trucks, and a very warm welcome to Michael Kaine, the Assistant National Secretary with the Transport Workers Union, and perhaps one of the coolest names of any guest I've had this year. Welcome to the program.
Thanks, Simon. Good to be here.
When you look around the recent accidents, it's been a bad year for trucks.
It's been a terrible year, Simon. You think 330 Australians lose their lives every year in trucking accidents. In fact, we've stopped calling them accidents. We call them incidents now because there has to be, we think, a greater recognition that the pressures that are on drivers placed on them by the likes of those at the top of these supply chains, very powerful clients like Coles, means that they're consistently under pressure. And I think it's really important as we head into this season that other road users just spare a thought for that pressure that's on those drivers. This is their workplace. They're on the roads for their work purposes.
Many have thought that because we knew the old days of the truck driver who had to pay off the extent of the money on a rig, thus creating pressures to keep the truck on the road to generate income. Many thought that the advent of the trucking companies would remove that pressure from the individual drivers. They provide a buffer between the retail sector and the truck. Is that not happening?
Well, it's a reasonable theory. The trouble is that you've got these economic powerhouses, these major clients, and we know across the rest of our community, whether you're a veggie farmer or a dairy farmer, the squeeze that those clients are putting on. The problem is that when that squeeze happens to trucking companies, quite literally people die on our roads. Now, that's something that we've seen some good movements from government. They've introduced the Road Safety Remuneration Tribunal very recently, and that's just announced that it's going to have a work program next year which is going to focus on those big clients, see if we can't lift some of these pressures off truckies.
1300 222 702. Do you drive a heavy vehicle for work, and have you noticed the increased pressure, or have you noticed that suddenly it's got a little easier? Tell us your perspective. 1300 222 702. Perhaps you're somebody that drives through regional New South Wales on a frequent basis. You may be in a car, you may be in a truck. What is it like? How well do cars and trucks understand each other and the individual driving pressures on each of them? 1300 222 702 is our number. Michael Kaine is the Assistant National Secretary for the Transport Workers Union. Of these 330 losses of life in truck crashes on the road, do we know is there a major cause for these?
Well, look, there's been years of inquiries now that have pointed to the symptoms that lead to these accidents, like speed, like fatigue, like the use of artificial substances to stay awake. They're the symptoms of these pressures that are on the drivers, and, crash after crash, investigation after investigation. And we think that now there's a bit of a breakthrough with this new tribunal that will start looking at these crashes not just as accidents, as acts of God, if you like, but looking back up the supply chains and looking at what pressures are on these drivers, because at the end of the day, particularly this season, to lose someone in such sudden and tragic circumstances is not what any Australian wants. Our truckies, quite literally the backbone of this country, carrying our fuel, our coal, all our natural resources to the ports, is such an important part of our community. And we've got to take care of them as well so that we can all be taken care of on the roads.
On the line is Mark. You've been a driver for 40 plus years, Mark.
Yeah, that's correct, yes. I drive a large rig delivering fuel, and the only pressure that I feel that when I'm driving is having to watch the other motorists, particularly just daily car users, that don't have any concept of what's involved, the trafficator unit, the sides that I'm handling.
A lot of drivers don't understand that you are heavy vehicles, excuse the cough there, and so I've seen cars cut in front of trucks at the red light, expecting that truck to stop in exactly the same amount of time.
That's correct. That's just one minor incident. Overtaking up the inside, blowing horns when you're trying to reverse into various situations. Just be patient. There's enough room for everybody. settle down and be aware of what's in front of you, what's around you, what's behind you the whole time when you're driving, because that's what I have had to learn to do over 42 years.
In those 42 years, describe your working week for me. What are your hours? What are the pressures upon you?
Oh, up at 4:30 a.m., into the depot no later than about 5:45, hook up, haul out, and I may have to cover, let's say 6 or 8 tanks on a long day, which might not finish until 6:30 at night when the pressure's on, to deliver the fuel. Most blokes go to the fuel station, they just want to get 50 litres of fuel. At the times I'm carrying 20,000 litres.
And is it your responsibility to unload that fuel as well?
Yes.
So you've got to be pretty well versed on how to do all of that side of the transport business.
Well, there are a set of very, very strict procedures, and they just simply got to be adhered to.
Who sets your working load? Who sets how much work you do?
The allocator.
Who's the allocator?
Oh, well, the transport manager of the company.
Okay. So do you get to negotiate? Can you say to him, look, that's not a fair workload, no human being can do that?
Oh, they don't do that anymore. Occupational health and safety implications are in place to make sure that every load is carried safely.
Mark, I want to bring up an incident that occurred to me yesterday, because I know it's not indicative of every truck driver listening, all right?
Yeah.
And I know that I was doing potentially the wrong thing. I rode a motorbike, and the tunnel was clogged, and in the safety or the breakdown lane, I could get past a big semi-trailer.
Yeah.
So me and the motorbike beside me cut into that lane. I know that's not the right thing to do. The truck driver swerved to the right and nearly knocked me off the scooter. So the bike went off the other side, on the left-hand side, and he swerved left and nearly knocked that bike off.
Yeah, right.
That's not indicative of most truck drivers, is it?
No, it's not, mate, but bear in mind that every vehicle, a push bike, a motorcycle, a motorbike, a scooter, a V-double truck, a bus, you're entitled to one lane on the road in the flow of traffic.
Yeah. I guess I was just trying to get by because there's no ventilation. I can't lock off the air conditioning, and I've got to breathe all that fumes, and I wanted to get away from there.
Yeah, well, that's right, mate, but you made the choice to get on the unit that you're driving.
Oh, yeah, no, I like it. It's
Yeah.
How much does it cost to fill your truck?
How much does it cost?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know, mate, a lot of money.
And it's $8 for me, so I guess, but that's the other thing. You have to carry an incredible burden of insurance, fuel. Yeah. How much, do you know how much that costs?
That's handled by the company, but I made a choice to do the job that I do, and I like doing what I do. And I'm happy to handle the responsibility of what I do.
Dennis is also on the line from Canberra. You try and be considerate to the truckies?
Yeah, they're doing a job, and understand how important their job is to the way the whole country runs. Without them, we don't get food in our shops, and that's a scary idea.
So how do you be considerate? How do you...
Well, as you're driving down the freeway, I spend a lot of time going between here and Sydney. As I'm driving down the freeway, you watch the whole line of traffic, and you can tell a truckie's just urging to get past another slower truck.
Yeah.
I always back off, let him out, let him go, because there's nothing worse than him having to jam his brakes on and cause a whole cascade effect.
Well, then it backs up down the track, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I can always pass him. I've got a quicker pickup. I'm not in that much of a hurry to get to where I'm going, and I don't believe anybody is. And that we should be able to get there safely together.
Thanks for that, Dennis. Chris is on the line in Gladesville. How are you, Chris?
Good, thanks. I'm good.
What's your perspective on this?
I get a bit fed up with the trucking companies. I think it's pretty lame that the trucking industry blames their customers constantly for putting pressure on them to do the job. They negotiate contracts with their customers to get the job done. It's the trucking companies that put the pressure on the drivers, like that guy that was on before. They've obviously negotiated a non-profitable contract with Coles or Woolworths or whoever it is. They've got a flawed business model. That's why they're putting pressure on their drivers to go over the limit and get there quicker. it's their problem. It's not the drivers just trying to keep his job.
It's a valid point, Chris.
These trucking companies, the owners of these trucking companies are some of the richest people in the country.
Michael, what's your response to that?
Oh, look, there's always an argument about bargaining and contracts, etc. But it's about imbalance of bargaining power. And of course, when you've got small trucking companies, 2 or 3 trucks where you've got an owner-driver, Simon, what chance have they against the might of the likes of Coles? I mean, it's just a common sense proposition.
Chris makes a very good point. You've got an incredibly, I'm not going to name some of the biggest trucking company owners in Australia, but they're not poor. Surely they can negotiate good arrangements for their drivers.
And they do, and I think Mark obviously comes from a good company, and those major companies do have big enough processes to do the job safely. But they account for about 45% of the transport task, and it's about 55% of the task that falls to hard-working owner-drivers and small fleet operators, and they have very little chance to negotiate fair contracts with the likes of Coles.
It's a good point, Chris. Can you hold on the line? And also, we'll stay with Michael Kaine, the Assistant National Secretary for the Transport Workers Union. Getting back to Chris in Gladesville, who was worried about the trucking companies, and then Michael Kaine, the Assistant National Secretary of the Transport Workers Union, pointed out 55% of the drivers on the road are not covered by trucking companies. We'll get into that conversation shortly, but I must let you know the Rural Fire Service has totally banned the lighting of fires for the Thursday, the 20th December, for the Greater Hunter. So there's a total fireplace ban in place in the Hunter region. The council areas affected are Cessnock, Dungog, Lake Macquarie, Maitland, Muswellbrook, Newcastle, Port Stephens, Singleton, and the Upper Hunter, and there's a severe fire weather warning. Michael, it's Chris in Gladesville, those 55% that are not covered.
I don't think, I'd imagine, I mean, I don't know the industry that well, but I'd imagine most of those guys are subcontractors to the bigger trucking companies. Those economic powerhouses, I think Michael called them, aren't negotiating with Dad and Dave's trucking company to, deliver hundreds of semi-trailer loads of groceries to their stores. Those guys, I guess, surely they're not dealing directly with these big companies and being dictated to in that way. I'm sure, once again, there's a trucking conglomerate between them who, again, is putting pressure on them to allow them to make a profit by pushing them to the limit.
Good contribution, Michael? Sorry, yep.
The people that are benefiting out of the trucking industry, they're squeezing every last drop, are the likes of Coles. It's quite right that there are subcontracting arrangements. It's one of the key problems, because what happens is that Coles will negotiate a contract, even with a major operator, and squeeze the margins so tight that that major operator is in no position to perform all of that work. So they do subcontract out the work, and then they subcontract it out again and again. So you end up with 5 or 6 chains of contracting, and by the time you get to the bottom, you've got an employee or an owner-driver trying to pay off their vehicle under extreme pressure and under rates of pay and conditions that are just, quite frankly, dangerous.
24 to 11 on ABC Radio across New South Wales. Steve from Queensland, you drive a heavy tow truck? Hello, Steve.
Yep, you there?
Yep, you there?
Yeah, mate, yep.
So you drive a heavy tow truck. So
yeah, mate, yep.
You see a lot of these accidents.
I do, mate.
And?
A lot up here, like, we've got a lot of roadworks going on between Maryborough to Mackay.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of what I see is just people just not being patient, because they're stopping, they're starting, they're stopping, they're starting, and then they get out and just do stupid things,
And
it does. I mean, that would be a factor, wouldn't it, Michael?
Well, look, I think improving awareness of trucks. An earlier caller was talking about, these are massive vehicles. People have got to be aware that, they're just not manoeuvrable. They're not responsive like your everyday sedan. And people who are on the roads irregularly, or perhaps, only at Christmas time on their family holidays, it's not saying they're not good drivers, but it's just that extra level of awareness that can help. And just to remember, the message from today is about these drivers, many of them, are under extreme pressure as well. So bear all those things in mind and be, as tolerant as we can of these truckies that are backbone of our country.
22 to 11. John's on the line in Bomaderry. How are you, John?
I'm well, thanks. How's yourself?
Good.
Look, I travel interstate a bit, and I've noticed in a few trips down to Melbourne, where you've got, mainly four-lane highway all the way nowadays,
yes,
the truckies seem to have developed a new way of driving, in that I can drive at 105 with my cruise control set. I see a truckie, a semi-trailer approaching me from behind, and he follows me right up until about 3 metres from my bumper bar and then pulls out to overtake. Now, the overtaking lane can be completely clear, and yet they do not pull over and go past. They come along and try to bully me to go faster. Now, they're supposed to be speed limited to 100 anyway. And I just find this very disconcerting, and especially when truckies complain about people changing lanes in front of them and then hitting the brakes. What are they going to do if I have to hit the brakes or if my car misfires or something?
Michael?
Yeah, look, obviously lots of trucks out there under lots of pressure, and the question we've got to ask ourselves as a community is, one person too many killed in trucking accidents, far too many. And it's a question about the pressures that are on those drivers, and while we can't excuse that type of behaviour, it is important to be aware of the pressures that these drivers are under.
I was coming down the Bells Line of Road back from Bathurst on 8 days ago, and I was tailgated for pretty much the majority of the way down Bells Line of Road. And it's intimidating for a driver to be in that situation, because it's like Jewel, the movie.
Well, I think what the key here is that with these community initiatives now, the federal government putting in place the Road Safety Tribunal, the question is, how can we make sure that when we get on the roads we can have a much greater deal of confidence that the driver's rested, they're properly trained, they're in vehicles that are properly maintained, that the pressures from the likes of the major clients are lifted from them. This is the work that has to be done. There's been 20 years of reports on this. And the time for action is approaching. And I know that truckies, the vast and overwhelming majority of them, take their job very seriously, absolutely diligent about how they perform their work. But it's those that are just under that intensity of pressure that have to make that terrible choice that no one should have to make. Do I put food on the table for my family? Do I pay my mortgage? Do I keep the wheels rolling? That's a terrible choice.
John of Ryde says it so well in an SMS. Point taken. However, don't forget the frantic cowboys who just tailgate at absurd speeds. Barry's on the road near Tamworth. This is what you do for a living, Barry.
Yeah. Well, I'm just going to give you some idea on the cost.
Yeah.
If I just let my prime mover with Shito company trailers, if I let my prime mover sit in the yard without driving or turn the key, it's $13,000 a year or more.
That's what it costs just to have it.
Just to let it sit in my yard.
Wow. Now, for me to fill up my scooter is $8.
It cost me, I don't know, $1,000 every 3 days, something like that.
Say that again?
About $1,000 every 3 or 4 days.
Wow.
I get 2 kilometres per litre.
And driving, are you in charge of your own destiny when you do that, or are you very much at the behest of the client?
No, they give you A to B, and they give you a time slot, and if you miss out in your time slot, you could be held up for 3 hours waiting on a turn. But if you happen to get there, someone cancels a job on you, you get there half an hour early, you've got to wait for your time slot, and then they can hold you up. So it's just a bit of a joke, this time slot business.
So I'm still trying to work out where does the pressure come from you? Is it from yourself? Is it from the trucking company, or is it from the client?
Well, the client. It's like a chain. The client tells, like what I said before, the allocator or the transport controller, and then it just works its way down the line.
And is it difficult for you, because as we raise this, I've got half a dozen texts here saying things like, just had a huge truck past me doing 110.
Yeah.
I'm on Pennant Hills Road is another text. There are trucks in every lane. It's very frustrating. Do you think that there's it's a difficulty to get your perspective across because of the behaviour of other drivers?
Oh, it's unbelievable. You sort of, if you're on a time slot and just say you're going through a 60 zone, you get some bloke wanting to do 40 and there's nothing in front of him, but he sits there. And that's why truck drivers get a bit of egg going when sitting up someone's rear end, they're trying to pass them. Or if you're in a 100 zone and someone's doing 90, it doesn't matter. They can do their 90. Just let us go around. It's just, it's just hard to get across the point. And then, like the other bloke said, pulling up and they cut in front of you. And if I get another truck, it'll have cameras on it, and front and back, and you'll have evidence of what people do.
All right, Barry, have a safe drive. Gavin's on the line. Gavin?
Yeah, good day. How you going?
Good. What do you reckon?
I reckon that since the work diary has been introduced, that the union was very instrumental in implementing. Deaths have increased since then because it's inflexible. It forces you to work when you're tired. And
I don't understand, because I'm not a truck driver, what you're actually talking about. So just explain the work diary.
It's a system in place where you write down your hours worked and your speedo readings, everything, and say you can't do more than 12 in 24 hours. And so,
see, that to me, from the naive perspective, looks like it protects the driver, but you're saying it's not doing that.
No, well, it's inflexible. You might be sitting around all day waiting to load, then you have load at 5 in the afternoon, and you've got to drive 12 hours because the book said you can. Whereas if you drove till, say, midnight or something, you did, say, another few extra hours the next day to make up for it. But you can't do because the law says you can't do that.
Michael?
Look, it's really, both of these callers have very good points. The key here is that there's been a focus on targeting drivers in terms of enforcement. And yes, it's important to have, speeding laws and fatigue laws. But what those things do, unfortunately, is they try to resolve it by attacking a symptom. Speeding's a symptom. Not having enough sleep, it's a symptom of these pressures. And what we've been advocating with drivers around the country, and that the federal government's acted on with this new tribunal, is we've got to look at the top of the chain and lift those pressures in the first place. And it's once you've done that, that some of these pressures off drivers and improvements will be made. So good points, but let's not get confused between the symptoms and lifting those pressures, which is the key to all of this.
A text from somebody saying, truckies, could 702 give some practical tips for drivers to help out truckies? What do we need to do? I actually think it comes down a lot to that, in that, car drivers need to learn about truckies, and truckies need to be a little bit more understanding of car drivers as well. It's a general understanding across the board, Michael. Yeah,
that's right. I mean, I think an understanding that this is their work, this is truck drivers' work, there's demands that are placed on them. I think Barry said it the best of the callers about the client pressure. And, from a driver perspective, simple things. Don't cut in front of the truck. Avoid the blind spot. Not too close. Caution on entrance ramps. Regular maintenance of your own vehicle, so that if you get into a situation, you're able to have some confidence in your own vehicle. These are things I think that can help that two-way street that you're talking about.
It's 11:15. You're on ABC Radio across New South Wales. Thank you to Michael Kaine, Assistant National Secretary for the Transport Workers Union.
Thanks, Simon.